Hello students, welcome back. Today we're going to start off our lesson with a little bit of a story. And the story is about a king, his crown, and a scientist named Archimedes. Here he is, Archimedes, an extremely smart scientist that lived between the years 287 BC and 212 BC in Syracuse, Sicily. Now Archimedes was an advisor to a king, King Hiero II, and he was charged with a task, a very important one. You see, Hiero at one point had a large stack of gold, and he gave it to a blacksmith to fashion a very beautiful crown. The king, however, was a little bit suspicious of the blacksmith, thinking that instead of 100% of the gold being used, he assumed that the blacksmith may have doped his crown with some unprecious metals, such as silver, at the time. Now, he had no way to prove it, but he wanted to make sure that he wasn't duped out of his gold, so he hired Archimedes to do the job. You see, the king had a stipulation, however. He gave Archimedes his crown to borrow, but he made him promise not to hurt it at all. Archimedes was a very smart scientist. However, this task was a bit challenging. Without being able to cut the crown, he wasn't sure what to do. Of course, he tried the typical things, such as weighing it and massing it out with other gold, but it was very hard to tell just by mass if the gold was pure or doped with silver. Well, the story goes that Archimedes decided to take a bath, kind of cool off and get an idea of what to do. While sitting in the bath, or sitting down in the bath, he noticed something that was very interesting to him. As he sat down in the water rose. It was at that moment that Archimedes had a very huge eureka moment. In fact, he got up out of the bathtub, naked, running down the street, yelling, "Eureka, Eureka," which literally means, "I found it." What exactly did he find? Well, he found another way to help him discover if the gold was pure or not, and that was by finding the volume. So how does the story end? Well, Archimedes went back to the king with his idea. He took the crown and measured out the mass and the volume in order to find the density of the crown. He then took an equal amount of gold and found the mass, volume, and density of that. Well, it turns out the blacksmith was duping the king, so the king had him put to death. Now, density is a very important property of matter, and one we use quite frequently when we are classifying matter. If you had two substances and you were able to at least get their mass and volume, you can calculate the densities of each and compare them. If they're the same, then you know that the substances are the same, because density doesn't change no matter how much you have. You can have a lot, you can have a little. Now, lucky for Archimedes, density also helped in determining the buoyancy of an object. He figured that out when getting in the tub. If I were to take these two objects, the regular and the Diet Dr. Pepper, watch what happens when I dump them in this dunk tank. Notice that the Diet Dr. Pepper rushes to the top, while the regular Dr. Pepper takes its sweet time. It all has to do with density. Now, I personally think that the density equation being called the love equation is very perfect. You recall we talked about matter previously, and matter is anything that has both mass and volume, and density describes matter very well. In fact, if you think about it, density is just how compact the molecules are to one another, how much mass is in a certain amount of space. So literally you can think about it as the molecules hugging or loving one another. Now, looking at the equation, we see the equation often like this, but this equation can tell us three things. Not only can it tell us density if we know mass and volume, but let's say we don't know density, or let's say we know density but we wanted to know mass. We can flip-flop the equation around to solve for any of the three things. Now, some students struggle with this, so I want to make sure to go over it. One thing to look at is what I like to call the density Illuminati triangle. And this Illuminati triangle can help us solve for any of these three equations. In fact, all you need to do is just take a look at the triangle. Look at the density, for example. If you wanted to solve for density, just take your hand and cover up the D on the triangle. Look what's left over. Mass divided by volume. Next, let's cover up mass. So mass is on top. Take your hand, cover it up, and what's left over? It's density right next to volume. Multiply them and you get mass. Finally, if you wanted to solve for volume, just take your hand and cover up the V on the triangle, and you're left with mass over density, or mass divided by density. These are three different equations you can use, all just rearranged to solve for different things.
Now, Archimedes was a pretty smart guy, but all it takes is a little bit of qualitative and quantitative thinking, and you too can be shouting, Eureka!
Let's review. We've covered a couple things in this lesson. First, density is an important property of matter that helps us classify matter. And second, density is calculated using the formula D equals m over v, or density equals mass over volume. You can also rearrange that equation to solve for any of the three objects.